All right, let's talk Dallas Cowboys. I'm Nick, and this is our daily Cowboys show. A little more fallout from the Week 1 defeat against the Philadelphia Eagles. We've got some follow-on reporting, some very interesting data, and without further ado, let's jump into what I like to call our stat of the day, a little palate cleanser, if you will. We're going to talk about one position group in particular with some PFF data, and this is the linebacker position group, which is a very interesting group. One of the things that's often forgotten about the Dallas Cowboys, of course, is that their best defensive player, with Micah Parsons obviously gone, not counting Trayvon Diggs and Deron Bland, I still think he would be, is DeMarvion Overshown. Of course, he's out the vast majority of the season. When he returns, the impact he will have, obviously coming back off the injury and getting fully up to speed, and what limitations he has going forward with the injury, that's all up in the air. But if he's 100% healthy, he's the best defensive player the Cowboys have at linebacker and across the entire unit. He obviously is out for this foreseeable future. But put that aside, this is the linebacking core the Cowboys have right now as we go into the rest of the regular season, at least until Overshown returns. And what's interesting is if you look at the grades, it was not a good day for the Cowboys linebacker core. But Maris Leafau was the best player. Now, not a lot of snaps, small sample size, only got 6. We'll get more into that in just a second. But his grade, his tackling grade, run defense coverage grade, everything was right about solid, right? Nothing spectacular, but, certainly acceptable, right? When it comes to PFF grades, there's sort of a breakdown, right? 90 plus is considered Hall of Fame, right? It's like Aaron Donald, that's elite, first team All Pro, right? That's Micah Parsons pass rush grade 90 plus, right? You're outstanding at it. 80 to 90 is considered Pro Bowl. That's a stud. That's a star performance. Like Dak Prescott's PFF grade was, I think, in the mid 80s, right? He had his stud performance against Philadelphia. So that's a good example. Jalen Hurts was really good against Dallas. He was in the 80s as well. So that's that kind of range. 7 to 80 is a really good starter, right? Had a really good game. And 65 to 70 is considered a decent starter, right? Maybe not a really good game, but certainly a average to above average. 60 to 65 is average to below average, and anything below 60 is sort of, hey, you should probably think about replacing this player or just an off night, right? And you can see the Cowboys, what we had here from the linebacking position. Maris Leafau was the only guy per PFF that was above average, right? Damone Clark with a decent performance at 61, Sanborn with a 47 grade. I thought Sanborn did okay, but I do think it's one of those things with this linebacker. When he was brought in, he obviously knew Eberflus's system. He was coming in to be sort of a veteran stable force. Same thing with Kenneth Murray, right? They wanted a couple veterans in there. They could, trust to line up correctly, trust to call out the defense, communicate everything correctly. Because one of the things with this Cowboys defense that is sort of forgotten is how many new faces there are across the entire structure. So if you look at the starters, right, obviously we got new starting defensive tackle, 2 new starting defensive ends, so 3 of the 4 there, 2 new starting linebackers, and of course the third corner with Jordan Lewis gone. So we're looking at 6 of 11 guys, new starters, right? And then you factor in the entire second group of defensive tackles is completely new, especially with Mozzie Smith being benched. You look at, of course, linebackers going forward, young guys like Shamar James into the mix, right? Overshown is still hurt. You can go down this roster all across the board, the backup safeties, a lot of new guys there. It's a completely backup corners, a lot of new guys there, plus a new scheme. So it's a completely new defense, a lot of volatility there. And so from Eberflus's perspective and the Cowboys front office, I could see where they went out and got veterans, Sanborn and Murray in this case in the offseason, just to, hey, can we have someone we have film on that we know can actually play in the National Football League? They may be below average, they may be average, but at least they can play. And I thought Sanborn's great. He was a little harsher than his performance. I thought Kenneth Murray was one of the worst defenders on the field for Dallas. I thought he did a lot of just a really poor things. He had a couple decent plays, but overall was relatively ineffective. And in space, he got just absolutely brutalized by Saquon Barkley. I think Jahan Dotson decapitated him on a block. He just made no real big-time game changes and just had a really lot of bad plays as well. So his PFF grade there, I think, kind of makes sense to me when it's all said and done. I'm not saying that Kenneth Murray will be replaced. I'm not saying that. But there are signs that there could be some shakeups at the linebacker position, namely involving Maris Leafau. Let's get into the reporting here. This first report is from Nick Harris at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. He said, here's the Cowboys linebacker snap count in week 1 out of 62 possible snaps. Kenneth Murray, the worst of the bunch, played 62. Sanborn, 47. Damone Clark, 41. Maris Leafau, only 6. Nick Harris noted, I'm having a tough time wrapping my head around that number for Leafau. Again, I think that was week 1. I think they went a little more veteran. I think they went a little more age over beauty week 1, which I kind of understand. This is not uncommon in the National Football League. It's not common in college football either. Hey, you start the veterans, you start the more experienced guys. You see how the team interacts, and you make adjustments. And it looks like the Cowboys are planning to do just that. If we look into this next report here, Also from Nick Harris at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, who, by the way, is a good reporter. You should follow him on social media or X or whatever, Facebook, whatever you use social media, whatever social media you use. He said on today's conference call, Cowboys head coach Brian Schottenheimer complimented Maris Liufau's limited opportunities defensively and his performance on special teams. He said Maris is earning those rights to play more. So I think the takeaway here is Liufau is quickly going to be becoming one of the starting linebackers, right? And I think he's going to slowly replace Kenneth Murray, certainly maybe get some opportunities over Damone Clark. I think Sanborn, he's one of those guys that I think Sanborn's a tough guy to replace until you get Overshown back, because he's one of those classic guys that's basically an average to below average defender in totality, but he just does all the little things, right? He lines up in the right spot. He's a good tackler. Is he going to make a lot of plays? No, right? Is he going to have his down plays? Yes. Is he good in coverage? Not really. Is he a good pass rusher? Not really. But he does everything at least okay. Is it acceptable, right? Can you survive with Sanborn? And the answer is yes, right? He's a good team guy and all that kind of stuff, smart player. So I think Sanborn's going to play and continue to play probably the rest of the season. Long term, I don't think he will, right? I think he's one of those guys that in the short term with Overshown hurt, new scheme, it just is an acceptable player. But I think Maris Liufau is going to start earning more and more reps. That's what Schottenheimer's saying, right? And I think after his performance in week 1 and limited snaps, I think he's going to get more opportunities, which is, again, part and parcel what happens at National Football League. You go out there week 1, you go out there week 2, week 3, you see what structures you have, what defensive plans you have, what offensive plans you have, and you say, okay, this guy didn't really work. Let's figure this out. Let's change this up, right? Especially with a new coaching staff, right? You have all of these concepts and ideas over camp and preseason, and then you get into actual football and you realize, that didn't work out. But this other thing over here looked pretty good. Maybe a little bit more of this other thing. That's what the Patriots, Bill Belichick, Andy Reid, Kansas City Chiefs, even the Philadelphia Eagles last year, they started 2-2, and people were like, what is wrong with Philadelphia? And they, of course, proved there was very little wrong with Philadelphia. They ended up winning the Super Bowl last season. So one of the things the month of September can be used for is to, of course, figure out what players, schemes, and strategies you want to be going forward. And I've talked about that a bunch already. I said, listen, the Cowboys, because of all these new players, because of some injuries, although Diggs doing some good things, returning early, that's a great sign. Guyton as well. I think that's a positive. But I said the month of September, new scheme, new strategy, new coaches, figuring out what players need to fit where. There's going to be a little volatility right there. I've said that enough. I don't have to go into detail again. But I said right now we're seeing the early indications of that, and that's Maris Liufau. Quickly, I think he's going to become a new starter when it's all said and done. If we're going to put a bow on this, he will be one of the starting linebackers, I think, by the end of September. Most likely him and Sanborn and maybe Clark being the third guy, if I had to guess. I think that's the direction we're heading sooner rather than later. All right, this next report from Tommy Yarrish, just highlighting some of the people that Schottenheimer thought really stood out. Brian Schottenheimer names Marshawn Kneeland, Solomon Thomas, Kenny Clark, Malik Hooker as players that stood out for the Cowboys on the defensive side of the ball. Offensively, Javonte Williams and Jake Ferguson caught his eye. So there's a couple things to really point out here, and I really like this from Schottenheimer, and there's really a few things, right? This is coaches have to especially head coaches, have to very aptly use the media in situations like this for a bunch of different reasons, right? Because you're trying to, as I think Herman Edwards said it great one time, he says, I don't talk to the media, I talk through the media, right? The best coaches do have one or two things with the media. One, they completely ignore it, right? They give nothing to the media. They disregard it completely, right? That's Belichick, right? The other coaches, they use the media as a tool. That's Bill Parcells, right? If you're looking at two sides of the coin there. Mike McCarthy, Jason Garrett, the last two, and then Wade Phillips, of course, they didn't really use the media at all, in my opinion, at least certainly not effectively. And I think what we see from Schottenheimer here is an attempt to try and use the media effectively. So Schottenheimer, obviously an offensive coach, right? He's an offensive guy. And if you were to be totally honest, for most of the night, certainly not the fourth quarter, but most of the night, the offense was the strength of the team, I mean, pretty clearly. But if you look at what Schottenheimer highlighted here, the majority of the guys listed, defensive guys. He says, hey, these defensive guys did great, right? Most people thought the offense was the strength of the team. The best performing Dallas Cowboy PFF grade-wise, and by most people's viewpoint, was Dak Prescott, right? People looked at CeeDee Lamb, right? Oh, my goodness, he had a great game, and he got separation. He just couldn't catch the football in the fourth quarter. Could have made a difference, right? A lot of people said the offense was the strength of the team, and I would probably agree with them if you look at the totality of the game. But Schottenheimer, very interestingly here, names a bunch of defenders standing out. I think that's important. If you're an offensive coach, you got to give a lot of public due to the defense, right? It's one of those weird things, but you don't want to lose a locker room. You don't want to lose a culture shift here if you focus too much, if you're leaning one way or the other as a head coach, one position group or the other, and give too much prompts or too much attention to one side of the football or the other, especially early on, and here's the second point, with the veterans, because I guarantee you veterans, you look at, of course, Thomas, Kenny Clark, Malik Hooker, they're guys that have been around, obviously, the block, Kenny Clark being new, Solomon Thomas being new, of course, and they're looking to see this head coach. They're trying to be the leaders of this team, setting the culture going forward, right? These veterans, they're going to have a key role with Dallas, at least this season. Schottenheimer understands that and says, listen, I'm going to get these defenders. They got to be on my side. They got to be bought in. How do you get them bought in? You shout out the defense, even though it was more of a 60-40 on the offensive side in terms of positive impact. Love that strategy from here. And again, targeting the veterans, that's really important here. Even Nealon, I understand he's not like a 10-year vet. Second-year guy, need big things from him. He's been around the block. Nealon's a guy who's a second-year guy, but he's a second-year guy going on 12 years, because what he battled through last year, came into the season getting a few reps and all that kind of stuff, a rotational guy, then gets more opportunities against the Giants, the injuries, you get a chance to start against the Steelers, gets hurt immediately, has to battle back through that, battle through all the trash of the season and all of this and all the injuries and the upheaval and things like that, goes through the entire offseason as the Cowboys draft Ezeraku, bring in Dante Fowler, Sam Williams returns, right? And then, of course, the Micah Parsons drama, goes through all of that, all of the volatility, and then puts together a good performance. Shout him out, right? This is good coaching here. Recognize you've got a good group of veteran here, non-rookie guys. I think Nealon, with all the stuff he's been through, he's like I said, he's a 2-year vet going on 12 years. I think this is a smart approach here from Schottenheimer. But the other fact I want to consider here is, how about highlighting Jake Ferguson and Javonte Williams on the offensive side of the football? I think that's really smart too. I think Williams, if you look statistically, had a solid but not unspectacular night. 2 short rushing touchdowns and some solid runs, but he ran hard. He's the mentality he wants the Dallas Cowboys to have offensively. Same thing with Ferguson, right? He blocked fine, wasn't special, caught a lot of short throws, did nothing special down the field. The people are calling it a drop. It's debatable whether, of course, that when he got hit in the head, got through the penalty. People are debating, is that a drop? Should he have caught it? It's one of those things to me. You can go either way with it. I get the argument. Listen, it hits your hands in the end zone, right? Got to catch it. I understand, but also, hey, it's a really tough catch. So you can go either way on that one. I'm not going to debate whether that was a drop or not. But I thought he played physical. I thought he played tough. I thought he did everything the team asked of him. And Schottenheimer shouting that out, I think that's really important, right? You want to shout out guys that fit the mindset you want to have, the team guys. All right, listen, Ferguson, you're going to go over the middle and get killed. You got to get up and catch 5 short passes and just do the little things all came along with no fanfare. He did. Good job. Hey, Javonte Williams, we're just going to have you run the football in the teeth of a good defense, fall forward, be physical, short yardage, goal line. Can you do that for us with, again, little fanfare? If you're talking about the running back position, no one's talking about Williams. You're talking about Sanders and the fumble, and they're talking about when's Jaden Blue coming in to replace Sanders, right? That's most of the conversation at the running back position. Schottenheimer very aptly says Williams embodied what we want from that position, embodied what we wanted as a team. Physical, hard-nosed, good football. Let's shout him out. Again, really good here using the media from Schottenheimer. I understand it's early in the season, and it's not like this isn't a huge swing thing, but it's just these little things that can, I think, make a difference over the course of trying to establish a culture and setting up long-term success. How you use the media is an underrated aspect of being a head coach in the NFL. It's an aspect that both McCarthy, Garrett, and Wade Phillips just really didn't care that much about. I mean, you can, again, completely disregard it. That's a strategy, but they didn't even do that. They kind of were lukewarm, middle of the road here. I didn't like that. This early on is a solid sign from Schottenheimer. All right, moving on to this report here. Some really good news from Nick Harris. Once again, a lot of good reporting. Cowboys head coach Brian Schottenheimer said cornerback Trayvon Diggs didn't have any discomfort coming out of last night's game and will pick up more reps going into week 2. Diggs played 26 of 62 possible defensive snaps against the Eagles. He wasn't even targeted once, had a really good game. It's one of those things where, you can make an argument the tackling. I think he had a corner blitz where he missed Jalen Hurts, and that was sort of, they got to stop on that drive. But, you never know. You could get a sack, fumble, or get better field position, things like that. But other than that, from a coverage perspective, I thought he was outstanding. And I think this is one of those things. And part of it was structure, I understand, and part of it was week 1 and what the Eagles were trying to do and all that kind of stuff. But I thought Diggs and Bland in coverage were very good. And I think that's one of those things that can be a certain real strength for the Cowboys going forward. Obviously, part of that will have to depend on safety play and how much they blitz, how much they play man, and all that kind of stuff. But I think if they can be consistently just good in coverage and get a lot from Diggs and Bland in these kind of situations over the course of the season, that's a real advantage for this team that a lot of other offenses don't have, or a lot of the defenses don't have, It'll put offenses in a bind, right? The Cowboys did pretty good. We talked about it yesterday in terms of stopping the run in between the tackles. And overall for the game, they were okay stopping the run outside of lane discipline, rushing the passer, if we're being totally honest. If they can cover with their top two corners solid with Diggs and Bland. And if they do a decent job, they don't have to be outstanding, but a decent job stopping the run over the course of the season, that's a really good situation to beat defensively, because it'll basically force offenses to have 15 play drives, 5 or 6 yards a pop, no penalties, no drops, no turnovers. And if the Cowboys get a sack or a tackle for loss, it'll blow up drives. So in terms of schematically, in terms of what the Cowboys showed, especially in terms of strategy going forward, I like where things are going. Again, specifically Diggs and Bland playing well and Diggs playing healthy. I think that's a good sign. All right, let's get into this next report here. This is courtesy of Adam Schefter. The former Lions defensive end Zadarius Smith is signing a 1-year deal with the Philadelphia Eagles. That's another pass rusher for 1-0 Philadelphia. So there's 3 schools of thought here. I thought this was kind of interesting. The first school of thought, which is probably the most likely, is that the Eagles, Howie Roseman, he's a deal guy. He's always trying to make deals. He if he goes 1 week without making a trade or making a signing, I think he starts jonesing. So he has to do something. And he felt Zadarius Smith was available and said, why not? There's a chance to. Where obviously, being Philadelphia, they believe they're in a Super Bowl window, which is true. They want to try and take advantage of it, which makes sense from their perspective. But there's other 2 sides here to approach, and I think they're both much more entertaining, so we'll talk about them. The first one, which is very pro-Cowboys, is that looked at the Cowboys' offensive line and looked at a rookie guard and Booker, 2 second-year guys, and BB and Guyton, an entire new scheme, entire new running back room, new wide receiver 2, and looked at his defensive line, his much ballyhooed defensive line in front 7, and was like, wow, the Cowboys went toe-to-toe with us and maybe even outplayed us. That's not good, right? If you're in a Super Bowl window and the theoretical second or third best team in your division, or certainly a team that's supposed to not be as good, maybe even the worst team in your division. Who knows? If you listen to some people, I'm not saying the Cowboys are. I'm just saying some people have been very critical of what the Cowboys could be this season. But if you're the Philadelphia Eagles, you sit there and say, hey, listen, this team is supposed to not be nearly as good as we are, especially without with all the changes they've had. And they went toe-to-toe with us and maybe even beat us physically, we got to make some moves. So that's a charitable side for Dallas, which I think could be a good side. The other side of the coin, if you want to be really negative, and I'm not going to focus too much on this because I like being positive, is that Howie Roseman looked at his unit and says, the Cowboys suck and we still didn't beat them. We need to add more pieces. Now, I think that's like a 1% thing, if I'm being honest. If I had to break out the percentage, I would say like 70%, this is Roseman trying to make a deal just because he's deal. 19%, he was disappointed with how close the Cowboys were to Philly and he's worried about the future. And 1% is like future matchups, and 1% is he feel the Cowboys aren't very good at all, and the Eagles just don't have the talent that they need, right? I think in the order of probability, I think I just listed them there. But I think if you want to be positive for a Cowboys fan, there's a decent chance that Roseman looked at this Cowboys front offensive line and their strategy and said, crap, like we may not beat them in Dallas next year or later in the year. That would be extremely disappointing. This thing could get interesting in the NFC East. I think it's going to be a very close division. I think all 4 teams are going to be really tightly compacted. It's going to be one of those weird seasons. It's going to be old NFC East football, if we're going to be honest, guys. I think the Giants are a lot better, right? Just because like Daniel Jones to Russell Wilson, Malik Neighbors is a good receiver, Abdul Carter looks like a good pass rusher. I think Washington regresses towards the mean significantly, right? This was a team last year that won the games they did. They were a 7 or 8 win roster that won the games they did because Jane Daniels had an all-time historically great season. Not rookie historically great, but just historically great season in general. And they won a million close games by the skin of their teeth on a lot of miraculous kind of stuff. I think there's going to be some regression towards the mean there. I think Philly's going to regress a little towards the mean. And I think we're going to see just a mass of humanity between 7 and 10 and 11 wins here in the NFC East. And it's going to come down to the wire. I mean, we could get to like week 14 or something like that, and teams are going to be from 6-7 to 7-6. And like everyone's going to have a shot at the division still. That's kind of my feeling for the NFC East right now. And I think Howie Roseman, seeing that game against Dallas, I think he has that same feeling too. So I think he looks at this and says, we're not good enough to extend past the rest of the division. That's what Dallas showed us the way Dallas played against us Thursday night. So we got to make a move. That's my gut feeling. I mean, there's also a good chance it's Roseman. He likes to make deals, so he makes deals. But listen, if we take the positive side of it, which I will, it's because Dallas outperformed and Roseman realizes he can't be complacent. He's going to make some moves. So, let's take the positive approach here. All right, this is also from Adam Schefter. He said, Micah Parsons, who is listed as questionable for Sunday due to a back injury, is expected to make his Packers debut versus the Lions, but he is also not expected to be in on every down per sources. The Packers still are figuring out how much to play him. It will be some, but not the full amount. So I don't want to talk too much about this, but there's a lot of people that said, well, did the Cowboys get enough from Micah Parsons? And one of the things that's sort of interesting that's emerging here is how much is Parsons going to be limited with this injury in the short, medium, long term, right? And he did miss a lot of time last year with injury. Now it looks like he's going to be limited to start the season for the Green Bay Packers, and it looks like he'll have to take, I guess, epidural shots the entire season or something to overcome his back pain. Based on the reporting there, it's a little hard to read exactly what the plan is there. It's not really too out in the open yet, which I can understand from the Packers' perspective. But it's one of those things when you look at the trade early on, how well Kenny Clark looked in the future of the Dallas with the cap space. Looks like they're getting Tyler Smith negotiations are ongoing. There's a lot of reporting there, which would be absolutely outstanding. You look at 2 more first-round picks. I'm not wishing this on Micah Parsons. I hope this is a temporary thing, and I hope he gets better because he's such a good player. And even though he's not playing for Dallas anymore, I wish him nothing but the best. But the reality is there injury concerns emerging for Micah Parsons? And boy, if you're a Packers fan, I'd be a little bit nervous. I mean, because you bet the next 2 to 3 seasons on Micah Parsons basically being a superstar player. And if he's playing only 60% of the snaps, or if he's limited at all, or injuries start rearing its ugly head, that would be a problem. I don't hope that happens. I'm not rooting for that at all. Right, I want Parsons to, unless they're playing Dallas, I hope Parsons plays and plays fantastic, right? But there is when you look at this trade and what the Cowboys got in return for him, there is an argument to be made that the Packers may be putting themselves in a tough position where a limited Micah Parsons, that's not what they paid for, right? They paid for an every snap All-Pro guy. So it's something to keep an eye on going forward. And it speaks to maybe, and we talked about it at the time, and I know it's still not even close to long term yet, but everyone just excoriated the Cowboys for a bad deal. As time goes on and more facts come to light and we get more information, the deal is starting to look a little bit better for Dallas as we go forward. All right, there's just one thing I want to touch on real quick before I get to the comments here. And I saw this post after the game, and I wanted to highlight it. And this is talking about Ted Wynn, who I guess was a reporter at The Athletic, or a former reporter. He just covers football. And he commented on, I think, a play where the final third down, the Eagles converted to win the game, or put the game away, I should say, at that point. The game was, Dallas still had a chance, but it would have been very tough. Obviously, even if they would stop Philly, they would have had to go 90-plus yards after the punt with less than a minute and a half and no timeouts. Hard, not impossible, but very hard. Wynn commented on that third down, 4-man rush, soft zone, cover 3 with rotation coming from deep with 3 yards to go. Does Eberflus know that Jalen Hurts could run, continually failing at situational football? And I thought about this, and I saw this post, and it just struck me, especially because at the same time, there's, I don't know if people have seen it or not, the Ryan Clark, Peter Schrager kind of discussion, if you want to call it that, on ESPN, where Ryan Clark said, "Listen, you're not a player. You're not a former player. You don't really know here." And a lot of people took that as, "Oh, Ryan Clark's is way out of line." And I think Ryan Clark's a jerk, and I don't disagree, but I don't agree with Ryan Clark 99.9% of the time. But I want to look at, when I saw this report from Ted Wynn, and I think Peter Schrager's a nice guy and a good guy, so I think that's sort of a weird incident. But when I saw this report, and as a former player myself, collegiately, right, and I played FCS Division I AA football, far from star level, not like Alabama or anything remotely close. We got killed by those kind of schools. We lost to Clemson 52-6 my junior year, for example. But I remember looking at seeing this report, and I remember thinking back to my college days. And we would lose a game or whatever, and some fan or some classmate of mine would come up to me and says, "I'm surprised you didn't know, quarterback X could throw the football well, because you guys didn't try to stop the pass." Or, "I'm surprised you guys," and it would always be like some superstar quarterback. Or some guy would say, it's like, you guys really needed to have a better game plan for this all-American defensive tackle. It's like you guys didn't even have a plan for him. And I remember thinking all the time, and I'd say, it's like, yeah, we had a plan. We had a good plan. They just were better. They just out-executed us. Or their plan turned out to be a little bit better than our plan, right? So it's one of those things that from an outsider perspective, it's like, well, why didn't you guys have a plan? Didn't you know this guy was good? And I always thought that level of snark and sort of elitism was a little weird from a guy who's outside. And I tell him, listen, we had a plan. They just beat us, right? That's what happens. And it may have been a bad plan, but we had a plan. We knew the situation. We're not stupid. And this is what I want to point out here. The snarky elitist commentary here from this reporter. I think it's one of the things a lot of journalists and a lot of people in media, sports and otherwise, continually to get wrong, right? They think the Ryan Clarks of the world hate them just because they never played football. No, Ryan Clark's an asshole, if you excuse my language. You just have to dismiss the Ryan Clarks just because they're assholes. But the criticism of people like Ted Wynn here in this situation, and I don't want to pick on Wynn here too much, but it's the level of snark and elitism you bring to the fold, right? It's not like you sit there and say, if he says 4-man rush, soft zone, cover 3 with rotation, coming from deep with 3 yards to go, and his comment is like, says, why this call didn't work for Dallas. If that would have been a why this call led to a Philly victory, whatever. If that's the text, different story. But the snark, the elitism there, does Eberflus know that Jalen Hurts could run? Everyone in America knows Jalen Hurts could run. Of course, Eberflus knew. That level of snark and elitism from a reporter, this is why people don't like the media. This is why people don't like journalists. Continually failing at situational football. Okay? I can make an argument. You're continually failing at journalism, at writing, because you didn't put a pronunciation mark there. That's not a complete sentence. You're supposed to be a writer and reporter, right? And I'm picking on Wynn here just to make a point that we have a lot of people in the media, a lot of reporters and a lot of journalists, whether sports media or otherwise, that continually go about it with such a level of snark and a level of arrogance and elitism, which is very, very frustrating to me as a fan. Because when I look at reporting, there's some good out there, and there's a reason I highlight those guys and say you should follow them, is that I don't want snark. I don't want your sort of like elitist opinion as some guy who works for a paper or a website or whatever. I want you to report the news and have some good writing and tell a good story and give good information. And there's a lot of great ones out there. I highlight them. Nick Harris, for example, is one of my favorites. Yerish, John Machota over at The Athletic. I can go on and on if people want to list. I think Todd Archer, ESPN's beat reporter for Dallas, is very good as well. So there's a lot of really good guys out there. But this is right here is just emblematic of why there's so much frustration, especially among people, former players with the media, and I think a lot of people with the media in general, is the level of snark and elitism. And this is one of the things I think journalists don't get. They put a post out like this, and they're like, I don't understand why people hate us. It's like, because you come across as a jerk. Ryan Clark's a jerk. And he always has been, and I think always will be. He's just all of his appearances, he's just kind of doesn't come across as a good person. I don't know him personally, but he just doesn't come across that way. But a lot of journalists will say, oh, Ryan Clark's a jerk, and they'll post stuff like this and not understand that they're doing the exact same thing. It's not worded the same way, but it's the exact same thing. All right, I don't know how much you guys cared about that, but I just wanted to highlight that. I think it's an interesting thing going on in the sports media landscape. But without further ado, let's get into the comments from yesterday. Let's get started with the member comments. Like I always say, if you're a member, and I appreciate all of our members, and I appreciate anyone who would like to become a member. It's a big support to the show. And if you are a member, I will always go to your comments first, and I will always address every single member comment. I'll get to non-member comments if I have time. So the member comment today from yesterday's video was from Bubba Baker 6244. He said, the only way I could be happier is if Dallas won. It feels great to be a fan again. Great show. There's a lot of this vibe going around where it's just sort of, it feels buttoned up. It feels like there's a path forward, right? You've got the cap space, you've got the draft capital, the team, not just competing hard, but playing physical football, good fundamentals, good discipline, a lot of good stuff there. So there's a lot of that vibe going forward. Now, there has to be wins at some point, right? Of course. You have to actually result in get some W's and get a healthy amount of them. But I think there's a lot of people, and I think not incorrectly, looked what happened against Philadelphia. And despite losing, and as much as losing sucks, and it is a binary business, can look at the product and say, listen, completely new scheme, like literally half the roster upheaval, including starters and key players, the best player gone. We're looking at, first round picks for the future, draft capital for the future, and put together a good performance, we'll take it. And I think there's a lot of that going around. Thank you, Bubba, for the comment. All right, let's go into the comments from the regular viewers. This is from Aggie 4Life77. He said, man, you have some great things going on with this channel. Thank you. Quick piece of advice. Go buy a green screen or set up a corner in your bedroom for a studio look. It won't even cost much money. Whatever mic you're using already sounds good. Yeah, I agree. I got to do something with this room. So I had my regular office, and it was I got kicked out of it. I've got a little kid. My daughter has taken over. Her room is now my former office. So yeah, I agree. I got to do something in here. I'm not big on interior design or interior decorating or any of that. I mean, I've got some memorabilia stuff. I don't know if you guys can see this. I mean, just not that you guys care. Since we're here, like, I've got a bunch of stuff on the ground here I gotta do stuff with. So this is from, I got all this. This is from I believe a 77 Super Bowl championship squad. Cowboys signed football. I got a lot of stuff here, and this is all on the ground behind me. You guys may not be able to see it, but I gotta do something with it. I don't disagree. I gotta do something. But in my defense, I was kicked out of my prior office, so I got a lot of stuff on the ground. I got to figure out what to do with it. But thank you overall for the nice words. All right, this was an interesting comment here from R.ShakeandBake1114. He said, it seemed Tolbert kept running his routes too close to CD, drawing the defenders into a small window for Dak. Tolbert looked like he had no clue. Yeah, I thought that was interesting. If you look on a lot of the drops or a lot of the miscommunications, there was a lot of spacing issues. And that, unfortunately, is a reality of not playing in the preseason, not getting a lot of snaps together. Tolbert did play a lot in the preseason, but when he was running routes, not with CeeDee Lamb. And that's a timing thing, that's a spacing thing, and that's the reality. That did affect a couple of the drops, I think, where there was a lot of bodies, a lot of traffic. A lot of people don't understand about receiver or forget about it, is that when you're running these routes and you're head faking, you get separation, if you see color in front of you, right, you're like, okay, I got to move around it, or I got to adjust to it, or you're surprised to see it. If you're running like, I remember that 3rd and 10 route where he ran that dig route and hit him off the helmet, the in-breaking route. And I think it may have been Turpin or Tolbert, I forget who, but had gotten kind of like jammed up, and Collinsworth had mentioned it on the broadcast, which I thought was a key point to bring up. And so when CeeDee Lamb turned in, he saw a lot of color in his face that he wasn't used to seeing. He was used to just, all right, breaking in on his end route and just seeing grass. So he sees a lot of bodies in front of him, has to kind of like acclimate himself to it. By the time he turns and reacts, the helmet hits him in the helmet, or the ball hits him in the helmet. That does matter. Like, that's an effect. And that's what, number one, pressure on the quarterback or press man, things like that, that can happen, right? So it is one of those things, it's just part of the game. And I'm not saying CeeDee Lamb shouldn't have caught the ball. He certainly should have. But getting spacing and timing right, that's something that's not going to happen as much early in the season, especially for new schemes. Teams that have players that have played a lot together and are the same schemes. I'm looking at the Rams, the Eagles fall under this bucket, the Baltimore Ravens, right? They usually get off to really good starts. One of the reasons why the Patriots always got off to slow starts, I felt, is because they're so scheme diverse back in the Belichick-Brady days, where they were trying to figure out what schemes and personnel they liked. Even if it was the same players, they changed things up so much, it would look kind of weaker at times in the first few games, and then they get things figured out. So I think this is a very important point to bring up, whether it's Tolbert or other people. I think getting the spacing and timing and separation right on the receivers, that's something that's going to be an early season problem that hopefully will be fixed as we go deeper and deeper into the season. Let's see here. This is an interesting comment. Boudini 671111 in all caps. All right, so that's how you get my attention. All caps, guys. You don't think the Cowboys are not going to win a lot of games? Double negative there, but okay. Put the crack pipe down. Kenny Clark is the reason we are going to win now. A lot of exclamation marks. We need one more true DL, and we have the cap space and draft picks before November trade deadline. DC for life. Well, I think the reality is, and there's a lot of comments about this in terms of what I mentioned, the Cowboys are rebuilding, and people are like, the Cowboys aren't rebuilding. What are you talking about? Folks, they traded away their best player, their best non-quarterback, or certainly the best defensive player, right? I know some people may see CeeDee Lamb as better. I think Parsons, it would be a little bit better as an edge rusher, as CeeDee Lamb as a wide receiver. I understand the debate. Let's just say best defensive player. They traded away an all-pro, their best defensive player, for future draft picks and future cap space. That's a sign of a team rebuilding, right? And I'm not saying they're going to, rebuild forever and it's going to be a dumpster fire, but this is a Cowboys team that hasn't gone through a good rebuild or reshuffling since like 2011 and 12, right? It's necessary. It needs to happen. They kind of avoided that in 2020, 2021 because they hit on Parsons and Diggs right off the rip, and Dak Prescott really started doing some good things, and Tony Pollard elevated his game as well. But really, if you look at the Cowboys team, they haven't gone through a full rebuild in a very long time. It's necessary. It's what you have to do. The Eagles did it, right? The Chiefs did it. The Patriots did it for under Bill Belichick at the very beginning there, right? You need to go through these rebuilds. The 49ers did it, right? It takes a couple years. You got to get some draft capital, get some draft assets, reload your team. The Lions did it, right? That's the reality. You got to go through these rebuilds every once in a while to get good quality, cheap talent. Otherwise, you end up relying on a lot of third or fourth round picks to become superstars. And that's a tough business to be in. So I'm not saying the Cowboys are literally trying to tank this, but they are clearly looking toward the future. That's what they've told us. That's what they've said with the trading Micah Parsons deal. That's just the reality. All right.
let's see here. There's a lot of comments about rebuilding here. This is from BMR Collects. He commented here, "It's driving me crazy that so many people, media and fans, are saying that if not for Lamb's drops, the Cowboys would have won. It's totally not true. If we are blaming one thing, it would be the Miles Sanders fumble, or even the fact that Sanders was run down by a linebacker that could have been a long TD. Those two plays by Sanders were the main reason they lost, and extremely lazy as usual for the media to say if not for Lamb dropping the ball, they would have won. Even with those drops, he still had 7 catches for 110 yards." Yeah, it's one of those things where it's sort of, I call it the it's like the Kobe Bryant effect, right? And this is one of those things where if you have a star basketball player and he, let's say, misses a few shots down the stretch, oh, he's the reason they lost. And the Kobe Bryants of the world would accept that. Like, Michael Jordan famously would too, where they'd be like, "Hey, listen, yeah, it's my fault we lost, right? I didn't make the shots." But in reality, it's like, yeah, but your play and the attention you brought got your team there. CeeDee Lamb had a fantastic game. Now, he dropped a few passes down the stretch that hurt his team, no doubt. But there were a lot of opportunities for other players to make plays, right? I think the Sanders fumble was absolutely disastrous, right? I think Ferguson not holding on to the football in the end zone, that's a tough catch. But that was an opportunity to make a play, and he didn't. Miles Sanders getting tackled from behind. Again, talking about opportunity to make a play, and he didn't, right? There are other instances like that where there are opportunities to make big game-changing plays, and they just didn't make them, right? And that's just the reality of it. And that's look, it's a close game, a physical game. You're going to have to make those game-changing kind of plays, right? Especially your stars. So criticism should be levied on CeeDee Lamb, but criticism should be levied also on Ferguson and Miles Sanders, and really there's a lot of other players, right? And that's what happens. Anytime you lose or win a game, it's a team win and a team loss. And that's a great point here to bring up. People who just focus on CeeDee Lamb, it's just because he's a star. And so again, if it's like, again, the Kobe Bryant effect, or LeBron James effect, or whatever basketball star you want to use, right? You miss a couple shots down the stretch, oh, it's your fault you lost. Well, that's not really how it works. It's a team game, certainly the NFL is, and I think blaming strictly CeeDee Lamb for the defeat, I think is false. For 3 quarters, he was the best skill player for Dallas, Philly combined, right? For the entire game, even with the drops, he was the best wide receiver on the field for either team. So again, I know there's a lot of criticism of Lamb, at least from the media perspective, but I agree with you. It's a lazy criticism, as usual, from the guys in big media. All right, I think that's enough for today. Look, obviously first Sunday, so we can enjoy this as best we can, just to try and see what happens. Football is finally back. College football yesterday. I don't know if any of you guys are what college teams you guys support, whether it's Texas A&M or whomever, but if it's one of those 2 programs, I guess solid, if not unspectacular wins. But look, football season is back. It's good to be back, and we'll see what happens as we prepare for next week for Dallas. Some more news to break, I'm sure, over the coming days. And until that time, I'm Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection.